Today on the Freedom Cast, Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz faced off in their very first VP debate Tuesday night. Eric Adams has been charged with corruption. Former GOP Senator Jeff Flake endorses Kamala Harris for president, and the House passes a bill to stop woke capitalism. We'll talk about all that and more today on the Freedom Cast. So last night, J.D. Vance and Tim Walz faced off in the first and only VP debate of this election cycle, and I kind of have mixed feelings on both of them because J.D. Vance was really not my first pick for Trump's VP. I always thought that the two best picks for Trump's VP were either Vivek Ramaswamy or really number one should have been RFK Jr. And he endorsed Trump later on, so he should have did that earlier so that Trump could have picked him for the VP. But he didn't, and now we're stuck with J.D. Vance. And I don't hate J.D. Vance, but I don't think that he is the best addition to the ticket because he's from a safe state. He's not really all that likable, and he just really doesn't add anything to the ticket. There's nobody that wasn't going to vote for Trump, and then they see J.D. Vance on the ticket and they say, oh, I'm going to vote for Trump. It's just not how it works. So overall, I don't think it was the best pick. He definitely could have did worse. He definitely could have been a neocon or something like that, like Mike Pence. He's definitely a million times better than Mike Pence because, I am a big Donald Trump fan, but if you look back at his first term, you can definitely see that Mike Pence was a vice president. You can notice that because if you look at his foreign policy decisions, a lot of them were really good. He was good for the most part on foreign policy. We had no new wars in the 4 years he was president, but he kept a lot of the neocons that were there during the Obama administration, the Bush administration, in his cabinet, and I think mostly that was because of Mike Pence. The vice president is very important. It's a very important role. It's contrary to popular opinion. A lot of people think vice president doesn't matter, but it does because that's the top advisor to the president. So really, I think J.D. Vance would be a much better advisor to Donald Trump than Mike Pence was. Because you got to remember that Donald Trump is not a political junkie. He doesn't know a lot about politics. So he depends on someone who knows a lot about what the right policies should be to guide him on it. And if he has a neocon like Mike Pence, he's more likely to be deceived into doing things that aren't the best. But if he has someone like J.D. Vance, he's pretty good. I mean, he's got some areas where he needs to work on, but he's pretty good on things like foreign policy, on a lot of the economic policies, and fighting for liberty on the social issues and things like that. So I think that as a vice president, J.D. Vance is going to be a lot better than Mike Pence. And then when it comes to Tim Walz, I don't hate Tim Walz like I do for a lot of the other politicians like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris, because he, along with J.D. Vance, they're not corporatists. They're not a part of the corporate state. I think that's a main point that we have to emphasize. That neither Tim Walz or J.D. Vance are really part of the establishment. They're not corporate politicians. They're both populists. They don't take any corporate PAC money, and they genuinely believe what they say. They have some good ideas, some bad ideas, and I think that they genuinely care about pursuing the right policies, and that they genuinely believe everything that they said. And that's why last night's debate, if you notice, is very civil. It wasn't a lot of name calling or anything like that because I think they both have mutual respect for each other. That neither one of them is corrupt. It was basically just an exchange of ideas, which if you have two people like them who are populist, J.D. Vance is populist right, Tim Walz is populist left, they disagree on a lot, but the one thing they do agree on is that we have to improve the quality of living for Americans, and we have to see what the right policies are and which ones work, which ones don't, and work it out. It's not like debating somebody like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or any of the corrupt members of the corporate state, either corporate Republican or corporate Democrat, who all they care about is enriching their donors and doing what's best for the corporations who own them, that they prostitute themselves out to, and they don't care about the average American. J.D. Vance and Tim Walz both care about the average American. They both want what is best for the American people, and they disagree on how to do that and what policies do and don't work, but they both have the same end goal. It's not like, when Donald Trump was debating Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton, where Donald Trump cared about the average American. He cared about how to materially improve the lives of people and take on the establishment. When you had the corporate Democrats that he was debating, all they cared about is enriching their donors and providing for the corporate state, whether that be by starting wars or doing subsidies for pharmaceutical companies and oil companies and all that. And then, of course, the corporate media provides cover for them because the same corporations who bribe politicians on both sides advertise on the corporate press networks, on CNN, on MSNBC, even on places like Fox News, or even so-called independent media like the Daily Wire takes a lot of bribes from corporations with their advertisers, and it shows. They cover for Israel all the time. Daily Wire. That's because of the corruption. But anyways, getting to Tim Walz, uh, I really didn't think he was going to be picked. I didn't think Harris was going to pick him. I thought for sure she was going to pick Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania, because Josh Shapiro is kind of the perfect mix of establishment and populist. He is establishment when he needs to be. He's friendly with donors and things like that. He's kind of a neocon when it comes to policy towards Israel and stuff like that. Uh, but he's also can present himself in a populist way, and he's done some good things in Pennsylvania. The first thing he did on day one was as governor was cut regulation for small businesses, which is a great thing. But she decided to pick Tim Walz. I was very surprised by that. Tim Walz is uh, a leftist, kind of like a Bernie Sanders type Democrat, which is good and bad. I think the best part about those kind of Democrats is they want to take on the establishment as much as people like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance do, because they want to get money out of politics. They want to provide for the average American. It's just that some of their big government policies aren't helpful, because if you look back at the history of some of these policies, all they end up doing is having people depend more on the state. And when you're more dependent on the state, obviously, that's when liberties can be taken away. That's how, believe it or not, Adolf Hitler got a lot of power. His predecessor, which I don't remember his name, but he was essentially had kind of the same political ideologies, people like Tim Walz and Bernie Sanders, which was that the government should help people. And he set up things like Medicare for all and other big government policies like that, which seem good on the surface because you're helping people. And he believed it was helping people. People like Tim Walz and Bernie Sanders, they're not bad people. They want to help people. They just don't know that their policies can lead to fascism. Progressive policies, progressive big economic policies, are a gateway to right-wing fascism. That's something that the left today does not understand. They don't understand that if they set up a government that is that powerful, that can, gain the people's trust by giving them free stuff and handouts and things like that, and on top of that, disarming the people through gun control, that makes it a lot easier for a guy like Hitler to come in after the progressive is in office and enact fascism and do a genocide of the undesirables. That's what happens. Now, anyways, getting to what I think of Tim Walz, I think that if Kamala Harris does win, Tim Walz would be the best vice president for Kamala Harris as someone who is an anti-establishment libertarian. I think Tim Walz would be a good voice in the room on a lot of issues, on things like foreign policy. I think that he would be very anti-war. He was opposed to the war in Iraq in Congress, and I think he would be very non-interventionist, and he would advised Kamala Harris to kind of take a more non-interventionist approach to our foreign policy and hopefully bring a lot of troops home. I think on things like ending the war on drugs, he did great. In Minnesota, he signed a bill legalizing marijuana. And I think that Kamala Harris locked up a lot of innocent people for marijuana to make profits for the private prisons of California because she is a corrupt piece of garbage. She's part of the corporate state. Tim Walz is not. He obviously has good intentions and he genuinely believes what he says and he wants to help people. I think he would be a good advisor on those two issues on non-interventionist foreign policy, ending the war on drugs, and criminal justice reform. And of course, the top issue, which is my most important issue, ending the corruption. I think he would be a good advisor to Kamala Harris on those policies, and J.D. Vance would obviously be a good advisor to Donald Trump on those policies. Now, getting to the specifics of the debate, I really didn't have high hopes for the debate. I didn't think J.D. Vance was going to do good. I really wish he would have picked someone like RFK, who would have did really well. He's very anti-establishment. But J.D. Vance, he surprised me. He did very well. The first question they asked him about foreign policy of Israel, and he started out by talking about how he grew up poor, how his mom was addicted to drugs, things like that. And that really helps. That really helps you look like a normal person. He did really good presenting as a populist. And I think that this debate performance probably will bring a lot of voters to Donald Trump. Now, Tim Walz, he did okay. He didn't do bad. It's nothing like, Joe Biden in the first debate. But I think that he was very nervous at times. He was kind of shaky. And again, they were both, very, very civil debaters. It was clear that they respected each other and that they were just having a polite exchange of ideas, which for them, I think that was good. Now, again, getting the specifics, the first thing they talked about was foreign policy on Iran attacking Israel. Now, obviously, neither one of them, I think, has the correct position on Israel. I think the position should be that the reason that Israel is getting attacked by Hamas and things like that is because of the war crimes they've been committing for, decades at this point. Similar to how the reason that 9/11 happened is because of America's interventionist foreign policy. Interventionist foreign policy brings these kind of terrorist attacks that we've seen both in Israel with October 7th and here in America with 9/11. When we go over there, when we kill their women and kill their children and destroy their villages, what's going to happen is people are going to get radicalized and they're going to go and they're going to commit terrorism. Just like, if all they know is, Israel killed my parents or Israel destroyed my village or America killed my parents or America destroyed my village, that's how we get things like people saying death to America and, people in Hamas, the anti-Semitism of Hamas saying, calling for violence against the Jews because the only thing they know about the Jews is that, quote unquote, the Jews killed my family or destroyed my village. That's what it is. And in order to stop terrorism, we have to recognize the source of it. The source of terrorism from both, the attacks we've seen on America and very recent attacks we've seen on Israel are because of non-interventionist foreign policies. Dwight D. Eisenhower warned in his farewell address that I forget the exact quote, but we must be aware in the conquest of government, we must be aware of the advancements of the military-industrial complex. And right now, both parties have failed that. Looked at the Bush administration, Obama administration were massively pro-intervention. Again, Trump administration was a lot better, no new wars, but then again, you still had, as I mentioned earlier, some neocons of the administration and Mike Pence as VP, and those kind of things happen. But anyways, I think that J.D. Vance definitely won the foreign policy aspect of the debate because he emphasized that uh, Israel should take care of itself. And I agree. I don't think we should be sending any money to Israel. It's horrible that we have people suffering here, and the thugs who infest Congress want to give all this money to Israel to enrich the defense contractors. That's what it is. That's why Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have been funding Israel and giving them weapons and sending troops. Biden sent troops. That's horrendous. He's a piece of garbage for doing that. These are American troops with families, and they're going to be giving their lives basically for the military-industrial complex. They're going to be forced to die for the military-industrial complex. They didn't sign up to die for the military-industrial complex. They signed up to die for their country. So I think that's bad, and I think J.D. Vance was definitely going to be a good voice in the room for Donald Trump in advising him to stay out of the Israel-Palestine war, to mind your own business, and to just kind of let it play out, that we don't have to be wasting billions of dollars to the Federal Reserve print all this money to send to basically fund war crimes in Israel. So that, I think, J.D. Vance pretty much won. Tim Walz, it's okay. He didn't give a bad answer or anything, but it was good that J.D. Vance emphasized non-interventionist policies. Next topic was climate change was the second one, which I think they both did okay. I believe in climate change, but I think that the main key to solving climate change is to allow the market to solve climate change. There's a demand for clean energy, therefore a free market can come along with a supply. And I don't think either of them touched on that. I think it was more Tim Walz stressing kind of the how climate change has affected the farmers in Minnesota and things like that. And J.D. Vance talking about how him and Donald Trump are going to try to get clean air and clean water. And I think that they are both they both did okay on that issue. But ultimately, I think J.D. Vance won that issue. The next issue was the economy, and J.D. Vance definitely won the economy. He did very good on that. He did very good on both defending Donald Trump's record and attacking Kamala Harris's record on the economy. Obviously, the main source of the inflation that we're seeing is the Biden-Harris administration, of them passing policies like the quote-unquote Inflation Reduction Act or Build Back Better, things like that, that have basically print billions of dollars just to put into the pockets of CEOs of oil companies and pharmaceutical companies and stuff like that. Those bills don't help the average American because they create inflation that gas goes up and groceries goes up and the cost of living goes up because of the inflationary policies. And I don't think Tim Walz really had an answer for that. So I think J.D. Vance definitely won the economy part of the debate. Next topic, I'm not really going in order here because I don't remember the exact order, but I'm just talking about the topics that they talked about in the debate, was abortion. Now, when it comes to abortion, I think that's definitely a big weakness for the Republicans, obviously because Roe v. Wade got overturned, and I think Roe v. Wade wasn't constitutionally sound, so it should have been overturned. That was the right decision. But the problem is, when it got overturned, a lot of red states like Texas started implementing abortion bans that were barbaric. They had a lot of unintended consequences. As you know, I think Tim Walz brought up about women bleeding to death because they can't get an abortion. Now, my opinion on abortion is I am pro-life. I'm morally pro-life. I think abortion's a horrible thing. I think you are killing a child. But I think that in some circumstances it can be a necessary evil. And I don't think that the government should make it illegal because you just can't. You can't do that safely. You're going to have a lot of unintended consequences. You're going to have women bleeding to death. You're going to have women who are raped who get traumatized, things like that. So I think the preferred policy is to keep it legal, but to try to enact pro-life policies by materially improving the lives of Americans, by trying to lift people out of poverty, by doing things like abolishing the Federal Reserve and a child tax credit and things like that, to reduce the demand for abortion. If there's a demand for abortion, free market come along with a supply. But if we do things to reduce the demand of abortion, the free market's not going to come along with the supply. I think that if you're pro-life and you want to abolish abortion, you shouldn't do that by using the heavy hand of the state. You should do it by using the invisible hand of the free market and by treating it as an economic issue. That if you reduce the demand and you lift people out of poverty, and you make it easier to have kids by getting the government out of your lives, out of your wallet, essentially, then you're going to have a lot less abortions, and the number is going to go down on its own without having to use the heavy hand of the state to restrict access to the procedure. But anyway, I think that J.D. Vance did good, and I think besides from lying about Project 2025 and the National Registry of Pregnant Women, which is a complete lie. Donald Trump disavowed Project 2025, and he's repeatedly said he's not going to start an abortion ban. And I definitely believe that. Donald Trump, at his heart, he's a New York liberal, which I think that's a good thing. I think that helps you as a Republican in the general election by not being so extreme on some of the social issues like abortion and gay rights and transgender rights and things like that. But J.D. Vance gave a really good answer. He talked about that how we should be pursuing the economic policies that make abortion unthinkable. I think that was the first time I really saw a Republican mention that. So I think he did a really good job in that answer. And Tim Walz did okay on that too. I think that issue was pretty much a tie. I don't think anybody won or lost that. Now I think one of the final issues they talked about was gun control. And I think that that moment it kind of came together over school shooting and stuff. They agreed it was bad. Want to figure out a way to stop it, but I don't think J.D. Vance did a good job of really emphasizing just how bad gun control really is. If you look at history of gun control, Hitler took the guns, Stalin took the guns, Mao took the guns, Confederates took the guns. Every single time people get disarmed or any kind of gun control is implemented, even things like red flag laws or banning assault weapons, things like that. That's when the government takes control, and that's when they do a genocide of the undesirables. A lot of people think that's crazy to say, but it's true. Especially another policy that a lot of people think is common sense that I definitely don't think should be implemented are red flag laws. I think Tim Walz said he supported red flag laws, but those are often used to take away gun rights from uh, you know, disabled veterans and things like that. If the government can just make up who is mentally disabled and who isn't, then they're going to have the excuse to disarm everyone. Especially something that people on the left should consider is that red flag laws can definitely be used to disarm transgender Americans. So, in fact, I think that Ben Shapiro a few years ago actually argued for that. And obviously, when you disarm a group of people that have already been oppressed and demonized, that leads to genocide. That's when, I know that the left talks about trans genocide. Well, if red flag laws are implemented, there might actually be a trans genocide because they can't protect themselves. They don't have Second Amendment rights. So, of course, I saved the best issue of the debate that J.D. Vance did the best in for last, which was immigration. They were talking about immigration, and obviously, there's a humanitarian crisis at the border. We have people coming in all over the place. It's very disorderly. We have people coming in from all different countries, and obviously, it needs to be solved. And obviously, the main aspect of the border issue that's recently been in the news cycle is about the Haitian migrants in Ohio, about them eating the pets and stuff like that. Now, a lot of people say that that it's a hoax. Um, but I think some aspects of it might be embellished, but I think that some of the stuff that was reported uh, did actually happen. And even J.D. Vance said that, not in the debate, but I think on Twitter, he said that people have called his office about Haitian migrants eating pets. And basically, the best part of the debate was when J.D. Vance fact checked the moderators right back, because it's something that the establishment media always does. That if you say something that is out of line from the approved narrative by the corporate state, by the establishment that they use to control you, if you say something outside of that line, they'll fact check you. And that's obviously what they did to Donald Trump in the debate between Kamala Harris. Was they basically took Kamala Harris's side on everything, and they quote unquote fact checked Donald Trump. Well, they tried to do it to J.D. Vance about the Haitian migrants, and he did it right back to him, and they cut his mic. They had to cut his mic, which I think is really telling about how the corporate media controls the narrative and censors people who disagree. So overall, in the debate, I think it was a civil debate. I think that J.D. Vance had a lot of great moments. He definitely won the debate. Tim Walz he did okay. He had some good moments too, but ultimately I think J.D. Vance won the debate. Not just saying that because I'm a Trump supporter. I'm going to vote for Trump Vance, but I think he actually did go out there and he made good points. He looked like a normal person. He's economically populous. He made a lot of sense on a lot of issues, especially what he did with the abortion issue, to actually not a Republican not lose the debate section on that issue. It was incredible what he did. So overall, I think J.D. Vance won the debate. Okay, so moving on. This is from CNN. New York City Mayor Eric Adams was indicted on 5 federal public corruption charges, including bribery and wire fraud. New York City Mayor Eric Adams has been indicted on 5 federal charges relating to bribery, wire fraud, conspiracy, and soliciting campaign contributions from foreign nationals, according to a 57-page indictment unsealed Thursday morning. Indictment alleges illegal action stretching back to 2014 when he was Brooklyn Bureau President. Now, this is really no surprise. All politicians are essentially corrupt. It's just none of them are ever charged for it. So it's always really surprising when you see a story like this in the news of a politician actually being charged, because pretty much if you look at especially Congress, probably 98% of people in Congress, in both the House and the Senate, are corrupt. And they serve foreign governments, they serve corporations, probably everyone except for I don't know, Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, Bernie Sanders in the squad, and there's probably a few more I'm missing, but basically everybody except those people are incredibly corrupt. The only problem is their corruption is legalized corruption, legalized bribes. Citizens v. United legalized bribes in 2015, and now they can take bribes from pretty much anybody: pharmaceutical companies, oil companies, defense contractors, Wall Street, the big banks, and even foreign governments. I mean, uh, Eric Adams is being indicted from taking contributions from Turkey. The Turkish government bribed him, but I mean, in Congress, look at AIPAC. This is the Israeli government bribes our politicians all the time, and nobody cares about that because it's legalized. So I really don't have a lot to say on this. It's a story is a few days old, but I think it's still worth talking about. It's always, again, it's surprising whenever somebody's actually held accountable for their crimes. I think, my opinion, I think you should put him under the jail. He's a corrupt piece of garbage, just like every other elected official who takes bribes from foreign governments and big corporations. He basically was only elected to serve himself. New York City is in terrible shape right now. It doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on. If you have eyes, you should know New York City is terrible. They have uh, obviously drug addiction and homelessness. Their prices are out of control for apartments and things like that. And yeah, because they have a corrupt mayor who only cares about themselves, and obviously members of the city council are also corrupt. So, anyways, that's all I really wanted to say on that. I think that the corruption in this country is obviously out of control, and I think American people have had enough. And I think that it's just going to show at the ballot box. Uh, I think that Donald Trump running for president really represents the anti-establishment, anti-corruption candidate. If you look at somebody like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they're incredibly corrupt. They take bribes from the corporate state all the time. They only serve themselves. But really, Donald Trump is the one who serves the American people and who's going to drain the swamp. He's got good people this time that are going to help him, and I think he's going to be able to do it. He's going to be able to end the corruption, and hopefully we won't see, shit like this anymore, where you got uh, corrupt politicians who usually get away with their crimes, but now some of them are finally being charged. So I think that's good. Anyways, moving on. This is from NBC. Former GOP Senator Jeff Flake endorses Harris for president. Former GOP Senator Jeff Flake endorsed Vice President Harris for president on Sunday, writing in a statement that he wanted to support a presidential candidate who represents a new generation of leadership based not on grievances of the past, but hope for the future. I've served with Kamala in the U.S. Senate. I've also served with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz in the House of Representatives. I know them. I know firsthand of their fine character and love for the country, the former senator from Arizona added in his statement posted on X. Now, obviously, this is not surprising at all. This is just an addition on a trend we've seen recently since Harris has started her campaign with former Republican senators, congressmen, and administration officials from the Bush administration. Obviously, the big one being Vice President Dick Cheney, which he is probably the most reprehensible piece of human garbage to ever walk the face of the earth. He should be locked up under the jail. He committed so many countless war crimes, killed a lot of innocent people, did drone strikes, things like that. Basically, it's a trend of former Republicans coming out and endorsing Kamala Harris, particularly establishment Republicans who never really liked Donald Trump. And the reason that these Republicans, like Senator Jeff Flake, who is a pretty standard establishment Republican neocon, supports corporate rule, supports war crimes, supports intervention, things like that, things that average American doesn't support, and that the establishment does in order to enrich defense contractors and things like that. The reason you've seen these Republicans, I think it was a big number for former people who worked in the Bush administration. I forget the exact number. I think it was like 100 or something like that came out to endorse Kamala Harris. The reason that that's happening is because the establishment is uniting against Donald Trump, because they know that Donald Trump is the change candidate in this election cycle. They know that he is anti-war, especially with J.D. Vance on the ticket. Obviously, I've said 2 times before, much better than Mike Pence advising him on foreign policy, that he is going to be anti-war. He wants to end the war in Ukraine. He wants to end wars. He wants to end the wars in the Middle East and things like that. And obviously, when you end the war, how are the defense contractors going to make any money? Because the war's over. So the reason that people like Dick Cheney and Senator Flake and those people are coming out to endorse Harris is because they are endorsing the status quo. They are endorsing the pro establishment candidate, which is not Donald Trump. Now, anyone who thinks that Kamala Harris is the change candidate just because she's not Joe Biden, all you have to do is look at the endorsements. Why would Dick Cheney endorse somebody like Kamala Harris if she was the change candidate? If she was actually the liberal one on foreign policy who wants peace and diplomacy for the troops home, he wouldn't do that. Neither would Senator Flake. So I think the thing that you need to keep in mind this election cycle is that the establishment is going to unite behind Kamala Harris because she has spent her whole life in politics and she can be bought and paid for by the donors and be used as a puppet to basically advance the agenda of the establishment, and probably worst of all, which would be the interventionist foreign policy parroted by people like Dick Cheney and Jeff Flake, which is why they're endorsing her over Donald Trump. Where, on the other hand, if you look, Donald Trump has gotten a lot of endorsements from populists who weren't really on board with Trump at first. He got Tulsi Gabbard endorsed him, and of course RFK endorsed him. Too late, in my opinion, because he probably would have been the best VP if he. This is going back to what the first thing I was talking about. I just can't let this go. But if RFK Jr. was Trump VP, he would honestly be up 10 points in the polls easily. Easily he would lead, but it's neck and neck now, and it's really anybody's race. But I think the thing to remember in this race is that Kamala Harris is the establishment candidate. She's the pro-war candidate. She's the candidate that will serve corporations. Donald Trump is a candidate who serves the American people. So, anyways, moving on to the final story. This is a press release from the House of Representatives. House passes the Prioritizing Economic Growth Over Woke Policies Act. House Republicans are taking action to protect the financial system, workers, jobs creators, and everyday investors from radical ESG initiatives. Today, the U.S. House Republicans passed H.R. 4790, the Prioritizing Economic Growth Over Woke Policies Act, sponsored by the Financial Services Committee's Republicans ESG Working Group Leader Subcommittee Chairman Bill Huzana. Reflection of the combined efforts of the subcommittee, Chairman Huzana and Representative Brian Steele, Ralph Norman, and Barry Loudermilk, strengthening our financial systems to preserve the dominance of U.S. capital and to protect the financial interests of investors and retirement savers from radical ESG initiatives. Today's legislation is a culmination of almost 2 years of work by House Republicans, said Subcommittee Chairman Huzanga. These sensible policies will encourage innovation. I probably got all those names wrong, but this is nothing new. Republicans have always passed kind of these distraction bills that try to focus on woke, and I think sometimes attacking woke is a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. It depends on what your definition of woke is, obviously. My definition of woke is I define woke as authoritarianism in pursuit of a perceived social justice. So things like banning free speech on college campuses, it's something that woke people do. That would be actual wokeism, although nowadays I think Republicans do it more with the Israel situation, but that's besides the point. Things like DEI, affirmative action, where you have racism against white people. Basically, wokeism is an abandonment of classical liberal principles by the left, because you go back to the 1990s, classical liberals used to support things like free speech and equality and things like that, and some of the a lot of the wokeism is an abandonment of those principles. Now, in recent years, I think that woke has kind of been overused. It's kind of been used as a substitution for gay or things like that. And when people say we have to fight woke corporations, a lot of times it just means that this corporation had a gay person or a transgender person existing in a commercial or something like that, like the entire situation with Bud Light a few years ago. If you remember that, basically everyone freaked out because Dylan Mulvaney was in a Bud Light commercial. Dylan Mulvaney just happened to be transgender, and that was it. People were angry at just the very existence of somebody who was, different, one of the others in a commercial, and that's obviously not an appropriate use of the term woke or woke corporation or anything like that. I think woke should be reserved for, again, my definition, authoritarianism in pursuit of a perceived social justice. So anyway, what this bill did was basically try to disguise a pro-corporate policy behind the word woke, fighting woke. Basically, what it did was it allowed for companies, the lobbyists, to basically come up with the best way to regulate companies by giving them money, taxpayer dollars, going right into lobbyists' pockets to pay for their trips, pay for their luxury vacations, which is absolutely disgusting that thugs who infest Congress think it's a good idea to rip money out of the pockets of hardworking families, homeless veterans, single mothers, things like that, in order to give money right to their lobbyists. It was blatant corruption, but every single Republican, including 3 Democrats in the House, voted for it, uh, mainly because the Republicans voted for it because they slapped the word woke on it. And I think it's a big mistake for the Republicans to go down this route of this crusade against woke, when a lot of the things that I mentioned before, quote unquote woke corporations, are not woke. Putting aside things like the DEI and things like that, which actually are unconstitutional. If somebody wants to have a gay person in their commercials, or they want to celebrate Pride Month, that's called marketing. It's called liberty, to allow people to kind of be themselves and express themselves in the way they want to express themselves. That's liberty. That's in line with the Constitution. That's what we should be fighting for. We should be fighting for liberty. I think a lot of conservatives, if you consider yourself a conservative, which I don't, I consider myself a libertarian. If you're a conservative, you have to ask yourself what you're conserving. And I hope what conservatives are trying to conserve would be liberty. But I think a lot of them just want to conserve tradition for tradition's sake. They want the state to enforce kind of the Leave It to Beaver lifestyle, which that's just not how the country was set up. That's not what It's not what liberty is. It's not what it should be. So basically, this is a disgraceful bill. I mean, I think there's a good chance of passing the Senate, and Biden's a corrupt piece of garbage. He would definitely sign it to give free gifts to lobbyists if they pay him enough to do it. So this was just a disgraceful bill coming out of the House. But really, when aren't disgraceful bills coming out of the House and the Senate of all hours of the day? So anyway, that's it for today's episode of the Freedom Cast. This is my first episode. I'm trying a new thing. I like politics, like to talk about these things. Consider liking and subscribing. Even if you don't agree with what I said, I think the best part of this country is that we can have open debate on things we disagree on. If you disagree with anything I said today, write in the comments and we can have a civil discussion. But anyways, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.